The use of Agent Orange during the Vietnam War left an indelible scar on both the landscape and the people of Southeast Asia. Over 20 million gallons of this toxic herbicide were sprayed across Vietnam between 1962 and 1971, decimating forests, poisoning waterways, and leaving generations to grapple with its devastating effects. The dioxins in Agent Orange caused widespread health issues, including cancer, birth defects, and chronic illnesses, impacting millions of Vietnamese civilians and U.S. soldiers alike. The environmental toll was equally catastrophic, with fertile farmland rendered barren and wildlife populations devastated. Yet, what few Americans realize is that much of the testing for this infamous defoliant and its devastating effects not only took place in the jungles of Vietnam, but right here in the Sunshine State. From Florida's dense forests to its fertile agricultural lands, large swaths of the state became ground zero for Operation Ranch Hand's domestic testing program. While these experiments were conducted under the guise of national security, the residents of Florida were kept entirely in the dark. It wasn't until the 1990s, decades after the first toxic chemicals were sprayed, that the full extent of Florida's involvement came to light. The U.S. military's choice of Florida for testing herbicides like Agent Orange was no accident. The state's tropical climate and diverse ecosystems mirrored the conditions in Vietnam, making it an ideal location to evaluate the effectiveness of defoliants. Between 1962 and 1970, Eglin Air Force Base in the Florida Panhandle served as the epicenter for domestic herbicide testing. Over 220,000 liters, 58,800 gallons, of herbicides including Agent Orange, Agent Purple, and Agent White were sprayed over test grids covering approximately 100,000 acres. Tests focused on dispersal methods, chemical combinations, and the long-term impact of herbicides on soil and vegetation. Soil samples from Eglin taken decades later revealed dioxin contamination levels exceeding 1,900 parts per trillion, nearly 100 times the Environmental Protection Agency's recommended safety threshold of 20 parts per trillion. While Eglin was the primary site, testing and application of similar herbicides extended to other parts of Florida, including the Everglades agricultural fields. Sugarcane and citrus farms unknowingly became experimental grounds for herbicides chemically identical to Agent Orange. In the Everglades, the runoff from herbicide use contaminated water systems, causing fish kills and affecting wildlife in one of the nation's most biodiverse ecosystems. Despite the widespread use of herbicides in Florida, residents were deliberately kept in the dark about the nature of these chemicals and the potential risks they posed. The U.S. government and chemical manufacturers maintained strict secrecy around the testing program, ensuring that the public would remain unaware of the toxic legacy being created in their own backyard. Testing at Eglin AFB and other sites was labeled as standard military research, with no mention of the toxic compounds being used. Communities living near testing grounds were not informed of the chemicals being sprayed, nor were they warned about potential contamination of water supplies, soil, and air. Chemical giants like Monsanto and Dow Chemical, which manufactured Agent Orange and its components, actively suppressed information about the dangers of dioxins. Internal documents from Monsanto revealed that the company knew as early as the 1950s about the toxic effects of dioxins, yet this information was withheld from both the public and the military. It wasn't until the 1990s, nearly 30 years after testing began, that declassified military documents confirmed Florida's role in Operation Ranch Hand. These revelations showed that the government was aware of the potential health and environmental risks posed by the herbicides, but chose to prioritize testing over transparency. The decades-long delay in revealing the truth about Florida's role in Agent Orange testing had profound consequences. Communities near Eglin Air Force Base and other testing sites reported elevated rates of cancer, birth defects, and neurological disorders, often without understanding the cause. A 2005 study found that cancer rates in areas surrounding Eglin were 60% higher than the national average for non-Hodgkin lymphoma and soft tissue sarcoma, both linked to dioxin exposure. Veterans stationed at Eglin during the testing period experienced similar health issues as Vietnam War veterans exposed to Agent Orange, yet many were denied benefits for years due to lack of acknowledgement. Dioxin contamination from testing sites seeped into Florida's water systems, affecting fish populations and causing reproductive failures in birds and mammals. The Everglades, already under pressure from development and pollution, saw additional harm from chemical runoff, with 70% of fish populations in some areas showing signs of dioxin contamination. By the time the testing program was disclosed, many of those responsible for authorizing and conducting the experiments were no longer in positions of accountability. The revelation of Florida's role in the Agent Orange program has sparked a long overdue reckoning. Veterans, environmental advocates, and affected communities have fought for recognition, remediation, and justice. Remediation efforts at Eglin Air Force Base have included soil removal and the capping of some contaminated areas, but much of the contamination remains unaddressed. The secrecy surrounding Florida's role in the development of Agent Orange and its devastating consequences serves as a stark reminder of the human and environmental costs of war. While the jungles of Vietnam bore the brunt of Operation Ranch Hand, the testing conducted in the Sunshine State left its own toxic legacy, one that remains unresolved to this day.